The Buddha never taught Vipassana meditation. Here's what he said. When the Buddha would tell monks to go meditate, he wouldn't say, "Go do Samatha," or "Go do Vipassana." He'd say, "Go do Jhana," right concentration. As for Samatha and Vipassana, he explained those as qualities in the mind. He didn't have a specific Samatha technique or Vipassana technique. He said you needed both qualities to get the mind to settle down, depending on what the problem is. Sometimes you can lull the mind into a sense of comfort just by staying with one thing. That's the Samatha side. Other times, though, you've got to analyze what's going wrong. Why is it that the mind doesn't settle down? What are you holding on to? What's getting in the way? There's an image I can use here in America. You can't use it in Thailand. You're like a dog lying down to sleep. It lies down and then discovers there's a rock or a root or something in the way. So it has to get up and scratch here, scratch there, get the rock out of the way, then lie down again. As you're getting the mind to settle down, you're dealing with aggregates. You're dealing with form, feeling, perceptions, thought fabrications, consciousness. If the mind is willing to settle down, you don't have to think about those things. Just give it one thing to think about, and your perceptions and thought fabrications will center on that, revolve around that, without you having to identify what they are. After all, we're not here to think about those activities. We're here to think about the breath, focus on the breath, perceive the breath, feel the breath. The breath is the focus. As you focus on the breath, all these other activities will gather around. If something's getting in the way, then you can scratch here, scratch there, analyze it, ask questions about it. That's what Vipassana does. It asks questions. How are fabrications to be understood? How are they to be seen with insight? Insight, here, being the insight that allows you to let them go. If you're not clear about what exactly is a perception or a thought fabrication in the beginning, that's fine too. Just have a sense that if there's something disturbing the concentration, and you can identify it and let it go, that's all you need to do. But as Ajahn Lee would often point out, modern day people are in too much of a hurry. They get a little bit of concentration and they want to go straight to insight, because that's where the real action is. Or so they're told, but it reminds me of an image in the canon. The Buddha uses it to refer to something else, but it's applicable here as well. The story is of an old Brahman with a young wife who gets pregnant. Because he's such a doting and devoted husband, he provides her with whatever she wants. She decides she'd like to have a baby monkey for her baby to play with after it's born. So the old Brahman gets the baby monkey. And then she says, "I'd like to have it dyed. Blue if we have a boy, pink if we have a girl." The Brahman says he'd be happy to do that. Wait until the child comes out. But she says, "No, I'd like to have it done now." So she goes into another room, takes a knife, and slits open her belly to see what gender the child has. Of course, the fetus dies because she's in too much of a hurry. The whole point about getting the mind into concentration to give rise to discernment is not just to check off the boxes that you've got this factor or that factor all taken care of. It's in trying to master concentration that you're going to gain a sense of what exactly a perception is, what a thought fabrication is, and so on. with all the aggregates, all the possible ways you could fabricate around concentration. The Buddha talks about how different levels of concentration get peeled away as you go from one level of concentration to another. Or alternatively, how you can look at a state of concentration and begin to identify where is the form, I-E, the breath, where is the feeling of ease, where is the perception, the mental image you use to hold the mind with the breath, where is the fabrication, the intention to hold things here, and the consciousness, the awareness of what's going on. As you get better and better at concentration, you can sort these things out without destroying the concentration. That's the important thing. If you try it when you're not ready, you start analyzing things, and the concentration is gone. To make another analogy, it's like playing the piano. When you start out, you're happy just to get the notes right. But then, as you get better, you learn how to listen to yourself. You learn how to phrase things. You learn how to get different emotions out of the piece. You see more and more potentials there. You see more and more of what you're putting into the practice, putting into the playing, because you do it again and again and again. And you get more and more sensitive to what you're doing. Your primary task right now is to get the mind still, to get the mind centered with the breath. Whatever helps keep you here, you do that. After a while, as the mind settles in and feels more naturally centered here, then you can let up a little bit. You don't have to talk to yourself about the breath. You don't have to adjust it. When it feels good, you just stay with the breath. As for whatever it is that's disturbing the concentration, as you get more sensitive, you'll sense it. In the beginning, you don't notice that it's disturbed at all when it's really settled in. Of course, if there are hindrances getting in the way, you do what you have to do to get rid of them. You can begin to see how a hindrance might be formed out of a perception or a thought construct. Or it might come with a feeling. You learn about these things by doing them, because that's what you're doing all the time. You're doing the aggregates in the same way that with your sense spheres, you're adding an intentional element there. Without that intentional element, you wouldn't sense anything in the senses. You have to get really sensitive to what's going on in the mind in order to see that. And again, the concentration allows you to get more sensitive to what you've been doing all the time. 1, because you're quieter, and 2, because you have a more developed sense of what really does feel good in the present moment. So the work is in getting the mind still. The descriptions for how you do right concentration are there in right mindfulness. You stay focused on the breath in and of itself. You're ardent, alert, and mindful. As for anything else that's not related to the breath, anything that's related to the world, you just put it aside. Then you get more and more refined in how you stay with the breath, more and more solid in your concentration. You learn things as you do the concentration, in gaining an understanding of how the mind can disturb itself and how it doesn't have to. That's where the insight arises. It's not an insight that's carried over from books. Ajahn Lee would talk a lot about Vipassana sanya, insight perceptions. They're not real insights. They're just ideas you picked up from reading about insight. Those things simply disturb the concentration and pull you out. So allow things to develop. Get really intent on getting the mind settled down and on getting more and more refined in your sense of how you can get it even more settled down. The insights will arise naturally. Tranquility and insight through Jhana. We often hear that the Buddha taught two types of meditation techniques, Samatha, or tranquility techniques, and Vipassana, or insight techniques. But if you look through the Pali Canon, you're not going to find them. There's no place where the Buddha says, "Go do Samatha," or "Go do Vipassana." But he does say, "Go do Jhana." It's in the practice of right concentration that you develop both tranquility and insight. You need some tranquility and some insight in order to get into jhana. And then, as the jhana deepens, as you get more skilled at it, the tranquility gets more intense, and the opportunities for insight also get advanced. After all, what is tranquility? It's learning how to settle in, be established, be steady. Think about the term for jhana. It's related to the verb jayati, which means the burning of a steady flame. As for insight, the Buddha defines it as looking into certain questions about fabrication. How should fabrications be seen? How should they be investigated? And how should they be penetrated through insight? When we look at the practice of jhana, we can see why it fosters both tranquility and insight. The tranquility is obvious. When the mind settles down with a full body awareness, things are really still. Think of those images of the lotuses in the pool of water that are perfectly still, saturated with water from their roots to their tips. Or the person with a white cloth surrounding his body, lying very still. But as you practice concentration, you also learn a lot about fabrication. It's a hands-on kind of experience. You don't sit there watching fabrications passively. You use fabrications to get the mind to settle in. Think of the three kinds of fabrication. There's the breath. That's bodily fabrication. Okay, you're focused on the breath. Then there's verbal fabrication, directed thought and evaluation. That's how you talk to yourself. They're two of the factors of the first jhana. Then there's mental fabrication, feelings and perceptions. States of right concentration all the way up through the dimension of nothingness are called perception attainments, and the different levels of jhana are defined by the feeling tone. Pleasure and rapture in the first jhana, more pleasure and rapture in the second, just pleasure in the third, and equanimity in the fourth. So you're dealing directly with these three fabrications. You get some hands-on experience with them. Once you see how you can create a state of concentration out of these different kinds of fabrication, and you understand what you're doing in those terms, the Buddha encourages that. Then you can apply the same lessons to other things that are coming up, and particularly those questions around insight. The Buddha teaches a 5-step program for dealing with anything that is a problem or a disturbance for the mind. You start out with things that are obvious problems, and you work your way up to the more subtle ones, until finally there's nothing left but the path itself, states of concentration, the activity of discernment, and you apply the same 5-step program to the path as well. That's when you're really free, when you're So when you start with something obvious, say lust comes into the mind, you want to see how it originates. And the origination is not to be found out there, in the sensory experience. It's to be found in here, in the mind. What is it about the mind that goes for these things? Then you see how it passes away when the origination passes away, and it comes back again when the origination comes back. What you're really interested in is the next two steps: seeing the allure and seeing the drawbacks. Again, the allure is not to be found out there necessarily. It's expressed in those three fabrications as well. As certain things come up, there's a feeling tone in the body that goes along with them. A breath energy feeling. And sometimes, a certain thought is appealing just because of that. Other times, the allure is in how you talk to yourself about it. Directed thought and evaluation. The stories you can tell yourself, say, around a particular object of lust. You begin to realize that the allure is not so much in the object, it's in the stories, or it can be composed of mental fabrication. The images, the perceptions that go around it, the feelings that go around it. You're really more interested in those than you are, again, with the object. Advertisers realize this when they sell something. Often, you look at the advertisement and there's very little of the actual object that they are selling. There's an awful lot in the atmosphere, the images, perceptions, associations that they want us to make with the object to make it desirable. That's the psychology of the allure. Many times, you're going to be embarrassed about what you see, about how you fabricate the allure, because you are fabricating it. You think about food. You could think about food in certain ways, and it's pretty disgusting. But in order to get yourself to want to eat it, to fix it and everything, you have to think about it in ways that make it really attractive. A lot of the pleasure in eating comes in the anticipation, and then in the way we think about it afterwards. What a great meal that was, as a way of setting us up for the next meal. So it's all in the directed thought and evaluation and the perceptions. Now, if this were all we had in possibilities for happiness, we'd say, well, who cares about the drawbacks? I want to go for this. But the Buddha reminds us, there is a greater pleasure to be found by developing dispassion for these things. This is why we always have to think about the Buddha's teachings in the context of the Four Noble Truths, because they set out the options that are available to us. And one of them is total freedom from suffering based on dispassion. This is what gets you to look at the drawbacks of the things that have you hooked. And just as the allure is built largely out of directed thought and evaluation, looking at the drawbacks, you have to talk to yourself, and you have to bring other images in mind, other perceptions in mind. This is why the three perceptions play such a huge role. They and the other perceptions that are derived from them. Seeing things as alien, as a disease, as an arrow, as a dissolution. These are all variations on perceptions of inconstancy, stress, not self. Or you can talk to yourself about things. You can remember some of the things that the Buddha said about how many tears you've shed, going from one life to the next, based on the allure of sensuality or the allure of whatever you're looking for. And it's all pretty empty. You create the allure out of mental images, like mirages, and then you go running for it. It's like that story of the sculptor who sculpted a beautiful woman and then fell in love with her, even though he knew that she was totally a creation of his. That's the way we are. So you can think of that story about all of the tears we've shed, more than the water in the oceans, all the blood we've shed going for sensual pleasures in ways that are dishonest against the law, and we get caught, and they cut off our heads. The blood that's flowed from our necks and our heads is more than all the waters in the ocean. A sobering thought. But the whole purpose of that is to provide new ways of imaging in the mind around issues of whatever the defilement is. The Buddha has those long series of similes for the drawbacks of sensuality. It's like a dog gnawing on a bone. In Ajahn Lee's explanation of the image, the dog can find no flavor in the bone except for the flavor of its own saliva. Again, we're the ones providing the allure. We paint our allure on things by drooling all over them, and then we fall for the drool. Sensuality is also like a hawk that's got a little piece of meat, and other hawks come and try to tear the meat away from it. If it doesn't let go, it's going to die. Sensuality is like a bead of honey on the blade of a knife. A little bit of sweetness and a lot of danger. Those are some of the images, the perceptions that the Buddha wants you to use. That's the kind of verbal fabrication and mental fabrication he wants you to use to counteract the verbal fabrication and the mental fabrication that go into the allure. And when you're devoted to seeing the drawbacks as much as possible, because you know there's something better on the other side, there will come a point where the drawbacks seem so great and the allure seems so futile, because after all, it's nothing. It's a total creation. Oftentimes, we're lying to ourselves about these things, and yet we suffer for them. Do you want to keep on lying? Do you want to keep on suffering for your lies? That's the basic question. That's how dispassion can be developed. And it's through dispassion that we have our escape. That's Vipassana. That's insight. Digging around in fabrications like this to develop dispassion and to overcome our ignorance of what we're doing to ourselves. That's how dispassion can be developed. And it's through dispassion that we have our escape. That's Vipassana. That's insight. Digging around in fabrications like this to develop dispassion and to overcome our ignorance of what we're doing to ourselves. This depends on the practice of concentration to set us up, to get us sensitive to the processes of fabrication, and at the same time, to put us in a good state of mind. After all, we're talking about pleasure, rapture, equanimity, which are good feeling tones to be coming from when you're doing this kind of analysis. Otherwise, the mind is just too hungry for the pleasure. And so, it's too hungry for the allure to admit to itself what the allure is, or to allow the drawbacks really to seep in. But when you've softened up the mind a bit with comfortable breathing, with comfortable thoughts, then you're ready for insight. The kind of insight that really does make a difference. So that's how the practice of Jhana develops both Samatha and Vipassana, both tranquility and insight. So, go do Jhana. That's how the Buddha ended many of his talks. And he continued by saying, Take advantage of the time while you have it. Don't let there be any regrets later on.